Hey guys, David Syvertsen back from Ourlads Scouting Services. We are going to dive into 5 names I want you to keep an eye on at running back for the 2025 NFL Draft. These are not ranks or stacks. These are simply 5 names that I have on my sheet that I'm going to zero in on in the coming months prior to the season. I'm going to keep them in alphabetical order, so these guys are not ranked in any specific order. Donovan Edwards from Michigan is number 1, 6'1", 204, the number 3 back in the Michigan backfield in 2021 behind future NFL backs Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. Edwards did not really factor into that backfield until 2022. That was his breakout season. He was Robin to Corum's being Batman. When Corum did go down in early November, it was Edwards that ended the year on a dominant run. Here are the 3 games: 22 carries, 216 yards, and 2 touchdowns versus Ohio State. Game number 2, 25 carries, 185 yards, 1 touchdown versus Purdue in the Big Ten Championship. And then 23 carries, 119 yards in the college football playoff against TCU. Among backs with over 120 carries, Edwards was 3rd in the country, 1st in the Power 5, with a 7.1 yard per carry mark. He did all of this with a partially torn patellar tendon in his knee. This is a kid that was teed up to be one of the top backs in the country in 2023, despite the fact that Corum opted to return to school. The production did not match the expectations as Corum dominated the touches and overall production. Edwards was still able to show his receiving prowess, catching 30 of 34 targets, and he did not fumble once after experiencing some struggles there earlier in his career. 2024 is going to be huge for Edwards. He is expected to be the guy in the Wolverines backfield, and he is coming off a 9-carry, 104-yard, 2-touchdown performance in the national championship. He will be one of the top receivers among next year's backs, and if he can get some of his 2022 mojo back, now that he is more than a year removed from that knee surgery, he can be a higher pick than Corum, who went 83rd overall to the Rams. Edwards needs space to be most effective, and while he won't be a bruiser between the tackles, he can be an ideal back on a committee-based approach with big play capability. Next up is TreyVeon Henderson from Ohio State, 5'10", 208. This kid was the recruit of the position in 2021. He shows up to Ohio State and immediately explodes onto the radar. His 1,248 yards were second most by a Buckeyes freshman, and his 19 TDs were the most. Just think about some of the elite backs that have walked through those halls: Eddie George, Ezekiel Elliott, Robert Smith. Henderson started off above that tier all by himself. 2022 was the start of his downfall. Injuries that caused 5 missed games in 2022 and then another 3 games in 2023 put a speed bump into his career. But one of the many things that have impressed me is the ability to bounce back. His first game back from injury in 2023, 24 carries, 162 yards, and a touchdown versus Wisconsin. His first game back from an injury in 2022, 19 carries, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Simply put, Henderson is one of the most explosive backs in the country and has an NFL-ready frame and will factor in the passing game. He has 50 catches over his first 31 games, and he has fumbled just 1 time across 495 touches. There is some occasional tight and rigid movement to his game, and it comes from a lack of fluid anticipation and vision. If he can improve that area of his game with a bit more experience and stay off the injury report in 2024, Henderson has as good a shot as anyone at being RB1 in 2025. Next up is Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State, 6'2", 216 pounds. Gordon was a rotational back as a true freshman in 2022 before getting his first start in their bowl game. 180 of his 305 yards on the year came in the final 2 games. In year 2, he not only took over the Oklahoma State backfield, but the entire country. Gordon led FPS with 1,732 yards on the ground en route to taking home the Doak Walker Award. The unanimous All-American was productive from every single angle. He led the nation in yards from scrimmage, 100-yard games, 150-yard games, 250-yard games, and carries of 20-plus yards, 30-plus yards, 40-plus yards, and 70-plus yards. He was one of just 3 backs nationally that gained over 1,000 yards after contact alone. This is a long-winded way of saying that Gordon is as explosive as he is big and powerful. There is a completeness to his game that really says something. I always like to see more than one productive season out of a back, especially coming from a conference not exactly known for its defense. 2024 needs to confirm the belief in the freakish talent this kid has. He already has 50 catches, including 39 last year alone, and he has allowed just 6 pressures on 146 career pass block snaps. At his size, Gordon is as complete as a back as you are going to find. Next up is Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, another big boy, 6 foot, 220. Hampton was the number 2 guy as a true freshman on an offense that truly revolved around Drake May in his first year as a starter. With much of the attention once again on the future number 3 overall pick in the 2024 draft, Hampton broke out as a sophomore this past fall. The All-American finished with an ACC high 1,504 yards, second most in school history. Hampton broke the 100-yard mark 7 times, a first for the program since future NFL back Gio Bernard did it in 2011. He did so 6 straight times in the meat of the conference play, a first in program history since 1970. Hampton is a true bell cow back. He led the Power 5 running backs in yards after contact per attempt. In fact, the gap between him and the second highest is the biggest margin of any 2 players in the top 30. He truly was in a league of his own when it comes to getting yards after contact. The question with guys like this often revolves around the passing game. Can he get it done there? Hampton has caught 34 of 37 passes thrown his way without a single drop. The 6 career fumbles on 380 career touches is too high, however, and I need to see how he responds to no longer playing in an offense that revolves around Drake May. Hampton is more bruiser than playmaker in that Audric Estime mold, who was the 147th overall pick in 2024, but he has more big play potential, and I think he has a little bit more to offer as a receiver. Rounding up the 5 backs I want you to keep an eye on in regard to the 2025 NFL Draft is Quinton Judkins, who transferred to Ohio State, 5'11", 210, a 3-star recruit out of Alabama. Judkins arrived to Mississippi as a true freshman in 2022 and immediately became the bell cow back for the Rebels. He averaged 21 carries per game and broke 100 yards in 6 out of 8 SEC matchups, again, as a true freshman. He led the conference in rushing with 1,567 yards, the second most in SEC history among freshmen, trailing only Herschel Walker back in 1980. The first team all-conference back came to the scene aggressively nationally as well, finishing top 10 in the country in missed tackles forced, touchdowns, and rushes of 10-plus and 15-plus yards respectively. 2023 brought huge expectations for the true sophomore, and while it by no means is a poor season, Judkins did not take a step forward. He had nearly identical number of touches, but the overall production was down a notch, as were his explosive plays. On the positive side, Judkins did not fumble once, and as a matter of fact, has not fumbled once over his last 15 games. In addition, Judkins led the SEC in percentage of yards gained after contact. It was over 75%. He remained a first-team All-SEC back before taking his talent to the Ohio State Buckeyes in 2024. That rounds out the 5 names that I want you guys to keep an eye on as fall approaches. It will be here in a hurry. These are not ranks, these are not stacks, and there will be more names that we discuss over the summer. But if I had to pick right now who the top 5 backs in this upcoming class, that's it. See you guys next week with the wide receivers.